Hi, and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom, a life lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. This week, we are tackling head on what people believe to be the problems or fears around doing inner child work, which stop them taking on this very powerful and effective form of self-development. Okay, David, so we get lots of comments and questions on our YouTube channel and in our Facebook community support group from people who have watched some of our teachings, listened to the podcast, they're interested in inner child work, but they don't know where to begin and they're concerned that it may be problematic. The biggest question or the biggest thing we get thrown at us the most often is people are scared to do the inner child work because they think when they start doing it, it's going to open up a huge box of problems and it's going to be very painful.
So that's the voice of the inner child. Don't they do a good job? They're going to stop you before you even start. So a lot of clients say, how do I know it's the inner child? So your description there is a perfect example of what the inner child does. Let's stop before we even start. Let me give you some feelings. Well, I think in your introduction, you use the word scared. Oh, I'm scared. Let's give you fear. Let's give you this. Let's give you this idea it's going to be a Pandora's box. Let me give you this idea about you won't be able to cope. You see the three lies. Let me idea that everybody's going to leave you and you're going to be unlovable and everybody's going to change. So this is exactly how the inner child controls you. It gives you all of these doubts and all of these emotions such as fear, anxiety, and questioning, and you accept it. And then what happens? You don't do it. And the inner child gets their own way. And that's a great example. So when people come on to me or when they write us in the community and say, as you said, I don't want to start, and you say, why? And then they'll give you a feeling, because I'm scared. There's the inner child controlling you. So what are you scared about? Well, I'm scared I might find something. What are you going to find? It's your life. You know everything about your life. And that's why you've got to do the golden thread and you've got to be pragmatic and talk to the inner child, because right at the beginning, they're trying to stop you.
So, David, would that even apply to people who've maybe got very traumatic experiences in their past, in their childhood, that, you know, for 20, 30, 40 plus years, they've almost been burying away, squashing down, that they know they haven't dealt with it, but they don't want to revisit it as part of the inner child work because they believe that it's going to be as painful as the original incidents or incidences?
Those are exactly the people that you've outlined there that should do this work. And those are the people, as if they're my clients, I believe we get the best results when we've done the golden thread and when we've gone down and found the inner child. You never find a monster. You never find a demon. You don't find the devil. You find a very terrified little child that is crying out for someone to help them, someone to show them love, compassion, someone to listen to them, someone to offer them some answers. And so the client that you just outlined is the client that I like to work with, because you can make the biggest, most effective changes, because they've been carrying that along with them all of their lives. And if you're watching or listening to this, does this apply to you? Have you been carrying along that dark past that you've shut off and you won't go visit back there, but you're still living it? It's pulling it along. It doesn't go away. Let's walk towards it. Let's switch on the lights. Let's sit down with the child. Let's discuss these things. Let's find a resolution. It can be done. I do it all of the time. And that free yourself, that you can walk your path. And that really is what this work is, this inner child work and the golden thread is about, freeing yourself, not to be held back by these childhood incidences, memories, thoughts, things that have happened to you as in the past. I want to show you how victorious you are and how amazing you are.
And also, David, that this inner child work, for some people very, very quickly, so within 1 or 2 sessions even, can bring about tremendous breakthroughs and releases of past traumas, past histories that have been locked away and that we've just been almost just like managing through life. But everything, yeah.
Sorry, Alex. I think there's a delay. I think the word breakthrough is the right word, because the breakthrough is to go and sit with your child, not to avoid it, not to shut it down, not to hold it down, not to ignore it. Because the more you shut it down, ignore it, hold it down, the louder it shouts, to go the other way, And I think that when you're doing that with someone like me, it can be very helpful, because I can walk by your side, because I want to meet your inner child. I don't see it as a monster. I see it as a spiritual being that needs our help, and I want to help them. And that really is a different approach, that you walk towards them. You don't shun them away. You don't push them deeper into the cellar. You don't switch off the lights. You don't hope that they're going to disappear if you ignore them or manage them, because they never do. They're there forever because they're part of you. Remember, it's your subconscious mind. These things happen to you. Amazingly, you got through it. Amazingly. Some of my clients, when I hear their story, it amazes me how they got through it, but they did. And that's the power of their Shen, their spirituality. And that's what we want to now release the inner child, so the inner child can find a way out.
I mean, David, a lot of people also think that if they start talking to their inner child, acknowledging that it even exists as a thing, as part of them, that somehow they're going to develop like a split personality or become a bit schizophrenic in a way.
That's far is from the truth, actually, Alex, because we all have an inner voice, as every human being that has an inner dialogue. So this is already happening now. And what we're doing with the Golden Thread is to make this inner dialogue more balanced, more true, honest, having integrity, listening, reacting. And so by ignoring it, you are developing a split personality because you're not being yourself. You're living, reacting from your feeling base. And again, so many of my clients, rather than being authentic and truthful and acting from what they actually believe, they are reactive. They are acting from their emotions. And this is why they don't want to accept that they create the emotion. They see themselves as a victim of the emotion. So that idea of having a split personality or not being true to yourself is actually what we're trying to solve. When you're working from emotions, when you say, I feel, oh my goodness, how many of my clients come on and they love to tell me how they feel. And I go, no, tell me what you believe. Don't tell me what you feel, because no one will ever know your feelings. I don't know your feelings. You can sit there and tell me for 10 weeks what your feelings are. I don't know. But you can tell me what you can believe. Now we can discuss, what do you believe and why do you believe that? I may agree with you. I may have a different point of view, but now we can have that conversation. So to me, that's not being dual personality or schizophrenic. That's being honest and truthful.
Yeah. And I think, as we say on a lot of our teachings, if the inner child, if that part of our mind, which was formed in childhood and carried through into adulthood, if it is allowed to run wild, it's not kind of educated, it's not controlled in a loving way, then we are living in extremes. We are living in the kind of boom and bust of extreme emotions, which is way more kind of split personality than if we bring the inner child back into a calmness, into a oneness with the authentic adult part of our mind and ourselves. And so that's really what inner child work is for, is to move from the splitness, the separateness of the inner child and the authentic self, and bringing them back together into the oneness that you always talk about.
No, that's really well explained. And we call that splitness or the emotional pendulum, because the inner child will be very good at swinging from one extreme, from stamping their foot and wanting it their way, to swing into the other extreme and seeing themselves a victim. There's a dual personality, there's a split personality. And the whole process of the golden thread in the inner child work, as you quite rightly said, is to bring yourself as into a oneness. We want the inner child as part of the team. We don't want it separated. We're not trying to eject it or throw it off the aeroplane. We want it part of the team because it has tremendous qualities. Have you ever thought about the quality that your inner child had? I'll tell you one of the greatest qualities that I find regularly with the inner child: determination. Now, think about the pendulum of determination. When you're in the center, you're determined. When you're on one side, you're stubborn. And many of my clients' inner child are the most stubborn people you ever. They dig their heels in, they will not budge. But then, almost in a blink of an eye, Alex, they'll swing to the other side of the pendulum and they'll give up. Oh, well, I can't cope, it's too much. And they swing from one side of the pendulum to the other. And that's the definition of the split personality or the dual personality or the dual beliefs that I call it. And really what we're looking for is, what do you believe? Why do you believe it? And as I always say, I don't have to agree, but do you agree? Do you agree with that belief? And then I offer them the Shen test, again, for new viewers and new subscribers. The Shen test is, would you say this to your physical child? Would you say to your physical child, you're not good enough? You can't cope. You are unlovable. You don't deserve it. You're unworthy. You should self-sabotage. You should beat yourself up. You should really think bad about yourself. You would never say that to your child. And clients look at me in horrified and say, that's almost like child abuse, David. I say, that's what you're doing to yourself. That's what you're doing to your inner child. And that's why I like the label of the inner child, Alex. It gives you this different way of looking at the subconscious mind. I much prefer it to the word ego or subconscious mind, because I want you to think of the adult side of you, the one that's listening to this and accepting or rejecting these teachings, is like the spiritual parent. And the inner child is like your spiritual child. And now it's your job, it's your responsibility to give it the guidance and the education that you didn't receive when you were a child from your parents. That's now your responsibility.
Great. And David, if we start doing this inner child work, start listening, paying attention, and communicating with our inner child in the ways, using the techniques that we teach in many of our teachings, and I will put a link in the show notes to our inner child teaching playlist where you can get lots of tips and techniques on there. But once we start speaking to our inner child, and for many of us, we've never done this before. We've been ignoring our inner child for many decades. A lot of people are concerned that what if the inner child just won't shut up? It just will keep talking and harassing me and telling me all its problems, and that it's like a switch I won't be able to switch off once I've started.
Yes, so this is another kind of facet that people often say, but that very rarely happens. In fact, it's the other way around. At the beginning, the inner child won't want to talk. It doesn't want to talk. And so I always recommend with my clients, because when somebody books a session with me for an hour and a half or an hour or 2 hours, we record the session. And what I call it homework. The homework is every day, listen to just 10 or 15 minutes of this session with a pen and paper. And every time you get a resistance or a pushback, stop the tape and then ask the child, why are you resisting this? Now, when you ask the child the question, it won't talk so much. The only way that the inner child will try and overtalk you is to control you, because in the past you've given up, you've switched off, and you have to be the one that's in control. So that's what I always say. If you want to do this work, it's work that you can do. You can ask the inner child, let's talk about the problems, 10, 15 minutes a day, get your journal out, write down a question. Say he comes and said, well, I'm not good enough. Great. Okay. Could you explain to me, sweetheart, why you think you're not good enough? Now, you'll find the inner child then won't be so talkative. In fact, he'll shut up and go, he'll probably say, I don't know. I can't answer that. This is the answer I normally get. When I say, when we do the golden thread, we go from the red light, we go down, and the inner child will say something like, I'm not good enough. I go, oh, so why do you believe you're not good enough? And then you hear a silence. So we sit quiet for about a minute. And then he goes, well, I'm just not good enough. But why aren't you good enough? I don't know. Oh, what, you just woke up one morning and thought you wasn't good enough? See, and that's what you've got to work on. And then it'll be, well, because my father said, or my mother said, or the way they looked at me, or the way they treated my brother or my sister above me, or the way that my teacher said, there will always be a reason. But when you are asking the questions, you'll find that the inner child won't overtalk you. If you let the inner child run riot, it will overtalk you because it knows in the past you've given up. And then it doesn't have to change because the inner child doesn't want to change. It wants to stay with a familiar.
Mm. And David, I think it's important to say that there is a truth when you start to do the inner child work and you start to understand when it is your inner child that is creating the emotional feelings and the emotional reactions to situations that are happening throughout your day, every day. That is a really vital and powerful insight and level of understanding. So you can go throughout your day and start to make a mental note, my inner child was rattled with that person or with that situation. Oh, that red light emotion I've just experienced in that moment because of this situation, that was an inner child fear. So it's good to start to have that raised level of awareness, but that we can still set boundaries as to when we sit down and communicate with our inner child. So in the moment, so in a work situation, our inner child may be a bit rattled or we experience a red light emotion. The technique is to acknowledge that, okay, I can see that this has made you uncomfortable. This is you internally talking to your inner child. We can talk about it later. And so to acknowledge it and almost say internally to our inner child, I can see something's going on here for you. Let's talk about it later. So you almost set a time in your mind when it's more appropriate, when you have more quiet time, when you're not at work, when you're not in a busy social situation, to have those 5 or 10 minutes every day. Say, okay, when that situation happened and I had this emotional reaction, what was going on here? What was I thinking? What was I believing in that moment? That is then the time in those 10, 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever you want it to be, to do that, have that inner child conversation.
Yes, that's a really good teaching, Alex. And for a lot of my clients, you don't have to do this, but you could have a little journal and just write it down. So it's like question and answer, question and answer. And another thing to consider, if you are unsure whether you can call it your inner child, the inner child will always CCJ. We call it CCJ, criticize, compare, and be judgmental. So it'll always criticize, compare, and be judgmental about yourself and about other people. So you'll know the inner child is when you hear that inner voice saying, they shouldn't have done this. I don't like the way they treated me. They should treat me better, blah, blah, blah. CCJ, criticizing, comparing. Oh, look at them. They're doing much better than me. Being judgmental about yourself or being judgmental about someone else. That is a great indication of your inner child. And as you just quite rightly said, 10, 15 minutes a day, please don't let it take over your day. You'll be amazed how much work you can do in 10, 15 minutes. And in fact, it's much better to put a timer on it. And in 15 minutes' time, even if the inner child's chatting away, say, okay, darling, that's the note now. We'll carry on tomorrow. because that puts the authority back onto you.
Mm.
And then write it down, write it up, make sure you're clear, and then go back. And this is where you must go back so the inner child can trust you. And this is another very important thing. Over the years, when you've avoided, when you've not listened, when you've shut them down, the inner child part of your mind has broken trust with you. And now you have to build that trust back up again. And this is how you do it.
And that trust thing, having that part of your mind, which is very fearful often because of childhood experiences,
creates fear.
Rebuilding that trust is really the first important stage in the inner child work, isn't it?
I think it's vital work, and that goes to truth, honesty, and integrity. That goes down to being accountable. That goes down to speaking the truth with the inner child, listening with honesty, and having integrity as when you deal with it. So if you say to the inner child, okay, sweetheart, that's enough for tonight now. We've done 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever you want to do. I've made my notes. We'll do it again tomorrow. You must do it tomorrow. You must do it tomorrow, because that's when the inner child then will start to build up that trust back with you. And then that comes back to the oneness. You see, the oneness is what we're looking for. This is the Taoist teaching. We're coming back and bringing into the oneness where you and the inner child are a team working together, not a tug of war pulling against each other.
And finally, David, I just wanted to touch upon, there's a concern people have, excuse me, about not only the inner child work affecting the relationship we have with ourselves in a really positive way, in a kind of healthy, self-nurturing, self-development, self-empowering way, but that when we begin to change through doing the inner child work for ourselves, that it will also change the relationships we have with other people.
Well, again, it could. Of course, it could if you are more authentic and more truthful and more honest. But I can't see that if people that are important to you, your family members, your partners, your children, seeing you less stressed, less anxious, less worried, less being emotionally reactive, and being much calmer, being much more truthful, being able to explain yourself clearly, calmly, being authentic, being spiritual. I can't think that anybody could or would disagree with that. And I think the interesting thing about this work is the first stages, the first few weeks or months is done to yourself, really. Nobody would even notice. If I'm working with a client, nobody would even notice. The only reaction a client would normally say to me is, "Oh, my husband, my wife says I look a lot calmer. I'm not sparking off so much." So I don't know whether anybody would reject that.
Yeah, I think, David, what it does also is that once you have a greater sensitivity and empathy for your own inner child, you can also have a greater awareness, sensitivity, and empathy for the inner child within everyone else you meet. And with that awareness also comes a sense of ease and understanding, which I think can only be good for any type of relationship we have in our life.
I like that word, ease. I think that's a wonderful word. And I think that's what the inner child work gives you, a sense of ease, a sense of flow. That's what Wu Wei means, being is in your flow. So you're more able to, rather than getting angry and getting upset with your children, with your partner, with your family, you're more likely to ask them, "So why did you say that?" I think that was inappropriate. I don't like it when you say that. And just to keep that dialogue and that voice in the correct way and be able to explain yourself and also actively listen to what they're saying to you. And I think as you're teaching yourself to actively listen to your inner child, you can then actively listen to someone else. And I think that's really important, that what other people think and say about you doesn't affect you so much. It's not your business. What you think about you is the starting point, and that really is the first point. When you're at peace, when you're at ease with yourself, when you're in your flow, then you can deal with difficulties much more authentically and much more truthfully. And I would say in your Shen, your spiritual, this is who you really are. This is not a mask. This is not you having to spark off at the slightest thing. This is you being calm and in control.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. So in conclusion then, I know you're a big advocate of inner child work, but what would you like to say to our listeners about if they have any concerns about embarking on this journey?
Well, there's so many things that my clients tell me that helps them. And one thing, and I do recommend this to clients, and a lot of them find it very useful. Find a picture of yourself, a photograph, when you were 6, 7, 8, 9, and talk to that child. See, that child is not evil. That child is not trying to mess up your life. That child is badly needing some love, guidance, attention. That child badly needs someone to hold their hand, just to give them a hug. Because that really where it starts is for you loving yourself, caring for yourself, being truthful, being honest, having integrity, valuing your Shen spirituality. So I would say, look at you as that child and see yourself, and we call it reparenting. See yourself as that child's new parent, and how do you want to bring up that child? And that's your responsibility, and we're here to help you. As Alex said, we've got lots of things. Have a look in the archives for reparenting. Reparent that inner child. Give it the information, the support it's been craving all of its life.
Great. And as I say, I will put a link in the show notes to the Inner Child teaching playlist. And there are many, many, many teachings on there to help you with this work. I really hope you have enjoyed this teaching. Please do let us know and perhaps share it with someone else who you think it may also benefit. David works with clients every week all around the world via Zoom video call, doing this inner child work, helping clients reach out and connect to their inner child, and doing the reparenting. If you'd like to learn more about David's one-to-one consultations, please also check out the link in the show notes. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We do new long-form teachings every Saturday, and now twice weekly shorts where you can get little snippets of wisdom to help you during the week. So don't forget to subscribe. We look forward to sharing with you again very soon. Bye-bye.